Eugenics originated in England with the work of Francis Galton. He studied traits and family lines and began the nature versus nurture debate. He focused on twins to answer the question of what was more powerful, heredity or environment. He proposed positive eugenics, encouraging the reproduction of eminent men and their families, whose accomplishments he had tied to the progress of civilization. He cautioned against drawing premature and harmful conclusions from his work, but like his cousin, Charles Darwin, his work was used as justification for some of the greatest crimes in history. Negative eugenics is the application of means to discourage the breeding of the unfit, including anti-race mixing marriage laws, segregation, sterilization, and euthanasia. Eugenics is not a true science, and though it is dressed up in mathematics to give it legitimacy, it has much more in common with the quack science of phrenology. Phrenology was the study of the size and shape of the human head to determine intelligence and character. The industrial age had thrown millions of people off the farm and into the city to work in low-paying factory jobs. The sheer scale of the problems of mental illness, alcoholism, and crime seemed overwhelming. Added to this, millions of Eastern Europeans and Italians came to America and made the native population uneasy. They were viewed as bad stock compared to the more Nordic types that had made up earlier waves of immigration from Western Europe. Suggestions for solving these problems took the form of negative eugenics. However, the eugenics movement's leaders were smart enough to realize that America was not prepared for euthanasia. The eugenics movement took shape in America with the founding of the Eugenics Recording Office at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory in 1910 by Charles Davenport, with money from the Carnegie Institution. The ERO compiled millions of files on ordinary Americans. The adherents of eugenics included some of the most influential doctors and scientists of the era, including Alexander Graham Bell, Luther Burbank, W.M. Kellogg, David Starr Jordan, the president of Stanford University, William Welch of Johns Hopkins University. Professors at Harvard, Columbia, Yale, and other universities taught 375 courses on eugenics. The hypothesis that mental illness, crime, and poverty were inherited factors and could be cured through negative eugenics had been by the 1920s accepted by American society as fact. Contests for fitter families were common at state fairs, and eugenics publications and ideas were widespread. This could not have been possible without the hard work of many eminent men and the application of large amounts of money. The great fortunes of the Carnegie Institution, the Rockefeller Foundation, Harriman Family, Ford Foundation, and others funded the ERO, the American Eugenics Society, the American Eugenics Party, and others. The American eugenics movement actively encouraged foreign countries to participate, concentrating most heavily on Germany. The opening address of the Second International Congress of Eugenics in 1921 was repeated in German. Only 3,000 people had been forcibly sterilized by the time the famous case of Buck v. Bell reached the Supreme Court. Carrie Buck was a 17-year-old girl who had become pregnant out of wedlock in 1920s Virginia. She was ostracized by her community, and her baby, Vivian Buck, was reported to the ERO as appearing not normal. Carrie and her mother's files were examined. Both had previously been classified as morons, and court proceedings were begun to have Carrie forcibly sterilized without examination. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes delivered the famous verdict of the court in 1927. It is better for all the world if instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit for continuing their kind. The principle that sustains compulsory vaccination is broad enough to cover cutting the fallopian tubes. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. This decision validated Virginia's Eugenical Sterilization Act and set in motion the forced sterilization of 60,000 American citizens. Eventually, similar laws were passed in 33 other states. Carrie Buck was not a promiscuous and disruptive moronic slut as she had been portrayed at trial by the testimony of her school superintendent. She had in fact been raped by her foster family's son. She had been on the honor roll. Her forcible sterilization was a result of lies, incorrect diagnosis, In a plot to pass the Virginia law, a review of the case uncovered a conspiracy between Carey's defense lawyer and the colony of Virginia to ensure the constitutionality of the Virginia law. The state was trying to save money by sterilizing the growing population in its mental health facilities. The greatest impact of Buck v. Bell was in Germany. In 1933, the Nazi government adopted the Prevention of Hereditarily Ill Offspring Act, which was based on Buck v. Bell, and led to the forced sterilization of 375,000 people and the banning of marriage and sexual relations between Germans and Jews. The Rockefeller Foundation funded the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, including the work of Ernst Rudin, a leading psychiatrist who became an architect and prime director of the murderous medical experimentation programs conducted on thousands of Jews, Gypsies, and others. American money also endowed the work of Ottmar Verschuer, who headed the Institute of Anthropology, Human Heredity, and Eugenics. He wrote in his Eugenics journal that Germany's war would yield a total solution to the German problem. Verschuer had a longtime assistant. His name was Joseph Mengele. On May 30, 1943, Mengele arrived at Auschwitz. Verschuer notified the German Research Society. My assistant, Dr. Joseph Mengele, MD, PhD, joined me in this branch of research. He is presently employed as captain and camp physician in the Auschwitz concentration camp. Anthropological testing of the most diverse racial groups in this concentration camp is being carried out with the permission of SS Reichsfuhrer Himmler. Mengele began searching the boxcar arrivals for twins. When he found them, he performed beastly experiments, scrupulously wrote up the reports, and sent paperwork back to Verschuer's institute for evaluation. Often cadavers, eyes, and other body parts were dispatched to Berlin's eugenic institutes. Several doctors who had been sent to Auschwitz for aiding Jews worked as his assistants and described him thus. His experiments and observations were carried out in an abnormal fashion. When he made transfusions, he purposely used incorrect blood types. He would inject substances and then ignore the results. He did what he pleased and conducted his experiments like a mad amateur. He was not a savant. He had the mania of a collector. The toll of eugenics laws would fall heavily on non-Jewish Germans as well. The chronology of events is instructive. First, patients in German mental facilities were sterilized. Then it was decided to gas them. Carbon monoxide gas was used in the beginning but was discarded in favor of Zyklon B gas for reasons of economy and effectiveness. Next, all the residents of the old age homes in Germany were either starved, given lethal injection, or gassed and then cremated. Finally, German citizens who had physical disabilities, many quite mild or correctable, were euthanized. Between 50 and 100,000 German citizens were eventually killed. The program was referred to as a mercy death. However, nothing could be farther from the truth. Witnesses said that the floor, walls, and even ceiling of the gas chamber were stained with blood, vomit, urine, and feces. At the center of the room would be an enormous pile of bodies in the general shape of a pyramid as people climbed to the top of each other to reach the last remaining breathable air near the ceiling. The American eugenics movement leaders went underground and changed the name of their organizations. The lifelong friendships between people like Verschuer and the leading members of the American eugenics movement continued even after the Holocaust. He and many others were never punished and remained influential men in society. Their portraits hang in many major universities, both in Germany and America. The names of their victims are mostly lost to history. They included the powerless people who couldn't fight back. Carrie Buck's daughter died at the age of 8 due to an illness. In her short career, she had made the honor roll.